a rancher here with my series on women ranchers. The first one with Constance Douglas Reeves. And my expert for her is a dear friend by the name of Rita Granberry. Now, Rita, many people know from our shared meeting and interest at Camp Waldemar, where Connie, as we all know her, was a staple there. She was a counselor and horseback instructor for my mother, myself, and my two girls. Now, Rita and her were actually dear friends, and up until her death, were very close. So, Rita, thank you for being here and being part of this. I am just thrilled because I know you're going to have so much good scoop and information about her. So, now, when I just said her name, Constance Douglas Reeves, do you think she had a middle name?
I do.
Possibly.
I think her middle name was Ada because I believe that that was her mother's maiden name, possibly. I'm not sure.
Okay.
So there's a lot of historical stuff, and that would be in Eagle Pass, Texas. That's where she was born and raised. But I for some reason, because in that thing that I was telling you about Ginger, it has her family tree.
Oh, we've got to get that. So
Yeah.
make sure once we close out, Rita is telling me about her Connie's nephew who did a historical interview with her and
Yes.
that it's listed. So I think people would really enjoy that, especially, the long line of people that shared their lives with her at Waldemar, generations, would actually love reading that. So let's just start. How about when did you first meet Connie?
I first met Connie in the summer of 1984. I went to the summer camp Waldemar. I was going to be on the waterfront. I was teaching swimming. And so at our first, probably, counselor meeting is when I met her. And she came in with just this presence, this beautiful white haired lady in her jeans, dirty from riding a horse, making sure the horses were all taken care of. But she had this air of just the way she carried herself, even after a long, hard day out, working the horses. And so I met her, that was the first time. And then I guess the second time within that time, we would do counselor horseback rides. And I'll never forget, I was so excited to go. It was a Sunday morning. I probably was up early and there, and because I had ridden before, and it had been years since I had ridden, and I remember her looking at me, and I was not a petite person, and and I know after the years she was like looking. She would size you up to see what horse to put you on, and I'll never forget. She put me on Joe T. He was
Ah,
a
okay.
lineback done. Won't ever forget it. Big, stocky guy. And when I got on him, go. And right then, I caught her eye because she's like, you know how to ride. Because Joe T was just a plotter, when you would put a little Happy Havener on,
Yeah, yeah.
that was the little kids in camp. And so he was one of those. So that was within 2 weeks of meeting her. I was able to, that kind of started the connection there that I knew how to ride. I knew something about horses.
I just love that. So when you were just talking about her, you kind of talked about your first impression of just a presence, and
Mhm.
I mean, she always, as far as I've known her, seen photos of her, she's had that just beautiful white hair, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
actually, even with riding, coiffed most of the time. So she looked great. But was there another impression that you would want to share with people just through your knowing her?
You know, she, one thing that always sticks out about her with me is she was a lifetime learner. She wanted to know stuff. And she was I would go see her in the off season. We drive up from San Antonio to see her in Kerrville and visit,
Yeah.
and she'd go, Rita, tell me about this internet thing, because she had heard
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
but she didn't quite understand it, or she would always want to know. And that was the biggest thing I think that I remember her asking, but she would always ask about other things that were going on. She stayed on top of current events. Yeah, she just always wanted to know what was going on.
Yeah.
Questions
I
about what
love
was
that.
going on in the world. She would talk about her experiences. One of my favorite things about it was she said that she could have kicked herself because her grandfather fought in the Civil War and he always wanted to talk about it. And she was young and didn't really want to listen. And she said that was a regret that she had, that she didn't listen more to stories about the Civil War. And I'm
Oh,
sitting there
wow.
going, oh my gosh, she had that direct connection to
Definitely.
somebody that was in the Civil War, and I was like, oh, wow.
Well, why don't you? That's a perfect segue. Why don't you tell us about her younger life and, what you know of her growing up and, into womanhood?
She was born, and then there's another little funny piece with that. She was born in 1901 in Eagle Pass. And, she didn't like being old. That was something that kind of bothered her a little bit. So at one time, since it changed to 1903, so that she could be a couple of years younger.
You're
She told me, but
kidding.
then, no, she told me that she did that. But then it got kind of messy with a lot of stuff later on, and she had to go back to the 1901 because back then they just took you at your word
Yeah.
for when you were born. And so I thought that was funny. But she was born to, I think her father was a county judge there in Eagle Pass, and she was the only child, so she was doted on.
Yeah.
She, I think her grandparents, took wonderful care of her and, put her on her first horse, I think, when she was like, maybe 6 months old. There is a picture somewhere, and I'll have to see if I can find it,
Oh,
of
do.
her
Yeah.
sitting. Of her sitting on the back of a burro, I think it was, but she was a little child. I remember seeing that picture, and then I think at age 5, her grandfather, and she just always was connected with that.
Yeah.
And, I think, and she went to school there in Eagle Pass until I think she was 16. At 16, they moved to San Antonio, to the bigger city. And so that would have been, the what 1917, 1918, somewhere along in there. And she went to Main Avenue High, so she started high school, which is now known as Fox Tech in San Antonio. And
Interesting.
then the other cool piece about that is that that's where eventually she went back, that Main Avenue High. But so back to, she went to Main Avenue High and graduated from there. And then she went to Texas Women's University.
Right. Right.
And she actually got her bachelor's there in speech. And so that's why she was quite the orator. I mean,
Okay.
if you knew her, she could just, I mean, belt out anything off the fly. I mean,
Yeah.
she just had that presence about her. And if you read her book, you can see her writing that she had that degree in speech.
Yeah.
And then from there, that's when she wanted to follow in her father's footsteps and be an attorney. And she went to the University of Texas, and she was the only female in her law class at the time.
So impressive.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and she finished law school, but she never took the bar because I think at that time, what she had told us was that was starting to get into the time of the Great Depression, and she had to support her mom and dad
Yeah.
because he wasn't making a tremendous amount of money as a judge or as an attorney because he wasn't, he might get paid in a little bit of food or something like that. That was, those rough times.
Yeah.
And so she knew that being a teacher, there was always a need for a teacher. And she was a wonderful teacher, in fact. And that was, her, I truly believe that that was her calling in life was, to be a teacher. And so that's where she started at Main Avenue High. And then um, she, I think, I'm not exactly sure, but I want to think it's 1936. Thomas Jefferson High School opened in San Antonio. And Thomas Jefferson at the time was the grandest, finest place. And she actually went there. At Main Avenue, she taught English, she taught PE, and she was the lassos, which was their pep squad
Oh, I love
sponsors
that
there.
part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and she actually did, I think, a pep squad at Main Avenue High also. It was one of the first pep squads. But then my understanding from what she told me was that when she went to Thomas Jefferson, she came up with the idea of the lassos because at camp where she had just started going,
Yeah.
they had trick ropers and
Okay.
it was
Yeah.
the lassoing and all of that.
And was Johnny
So,
Reagan there then, or
yeah,
the
I think so.
gentleman from? And he was Australia or New Zealand. What? And
I
I
can't
had him for
remember
trick roping.
trick roping. And
Uh,
so she did that,
okay.
for years. They went to I think it was the World's Fair in New York.
Well, and
They
are the Lassos still? Is that still an
Yes, that's
organization?
still there.
That's
That
impressive.
well, as far as I know, I mean, I've left San Antonio, but I
Yeah.
know that the lassos are, that's their pep squad. They wear do their routines. I think with trick ropes still, and things. So yeah, she did that, and that she was very proud of that.
Of
She got
course.
to meet Eleanor Roosevelt when they, at that time, the pep squad got to. They traveled by Pullman car from San
Wow.
Antonio to New York.
Yeah.
And she was responsible. I don't know how many. I think hundreds of kids that she took at that time traveling.
Fortunate kids.
Yes, very. And Thomas Jefferson was the elite high school at that time
Yeah.
in San Antonio.
So she would just do her summers in Hunt, Texas, or at Camp
Mhm.
Waldemar, and then go back and teach for the school year during that time period?
Well, yeah, she did for a few years because she started in Waldemar in 1936, I believe.
Okay.
And here's another piece I can't verify totally, but I believe at one time because she rode horses at Breckenridge Park, and they had a stable there, and she
Okay.
taught riding lessons. And I want to think that Ora Johnson, who was the founder of Camp Waldemar, actually asked her to go to and be the horseback riding instructor, and she turned her down. And
Yeah, I think
then
I remember
in
reading that.
yeah, and then in 1936, I believe it was her aunt or her niece, Doris, contacted her, and that's when she did. And so she married Jack. She met Jack Reeves, working there at camp, but I think they married in 42, and then she went to live on the ranch there
And
in Junction.
and he was a cowboy there. Forgive me, there's a little blurb if you had said that, but he was a cowboy and
Yes.
living there.
Yeah, well, he actually worked, if I'm not mistaken, he worked for W.T. Johnson,
Oh,
who
okay.
was, I think, Aunt or Doris's maybe father. I'm not sure
Yeah.
the relationship. So in Junction, that's where the ranch was, and somehow Jack had gotten associated with W.T. Johnson because he was on the rodeo circuit.
Oh,
and
okay.
and W.T. Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, he kind of was a rodeo promoter. And Jack actually, I think, went to New York and rode in rodeos and those things. And so that's how he was associated with Waldemar, was through WT. He worked on the ranch, and then they would bring the horses in the summer to camp to use for the
Oh, okay.
summertime.
Yeah.
And so that's how that connection. And then, like Connie always said, the only two things that they ever really had in common were horses, because they came from two very different worlds. Jack was just, a very, um, I don't want to say poor, but at that time, they were different classes of people.
Right.
And but they had a love of horses together, and that was what made their love story, I
Well,
think,
and they
so
made a
unique.
lifetime of it, didn't they?
Yeah, a
I mean
lifetime.
that and that I what did her family think about the union?
I don't really know. She never really talked a lot about that. So I don't know if they weren't just overly happy about that, because, she really didn't talk a lot about, like, when her parents died. I think her dad died before her mom, but that was not a conversation that we
Never
talked a
did.
lot. I mean, she
Well, I
talked
mean,
about her parents.
I just think she was so very unique with not only getting an education, having a profession, even teaching, but a profession, and then, of course, going to law school and getting her degree, correct? I mean,
Correct.
that's just so very admirable, and goes to show, like you already brought up earlier, how much she enjoyed learning and wanted to be on top of things, but also how very lovely that the life she chose was for Jack, and the
Yes.
love of horses, and actually, and I know you'll agree with me, which goes along with her teaching and education, but loving children, and being there to me such a wonderful role model and
Mhm.
a great human being for that. Well, you had her not only, of course, as a friend, and you already stated riding with her, but kind of as a boss because you
Mhm.
also taught horseback riding under her.
Yeah, just one time I did, but yeah,
Okay.
but I'm so glad that I was able to teach under her one summer,
Well,
one
but
session.
it's just one other aspect. So,
Yeah.
kind of with her as a boss, how did you see her?
She was very safety conscious.
Good.
I mean,
Okay.
safety was top priority, and making sure that people, followed the rules, knew what was expected of them. But she did it in a way that was, I don't know how to best describe it, as it wasn't mean, but it was respectful. You respected her. If she
Oh,
told you
yeah.
to put your heels down,
Yeah.
you put your heels down. If she told
Yeah.
you to put your reins in the left hand, you put your reins in the left hand. And that voice, if you never heard her
Yeah, no,
voice,
I
it
can
was
hear
that
it. I can hear it
gravelly.
right now. Yeah.
I hear her calling my name because she had a unique way of saying my name, and I can't
Yeah.
say it. But that's one of those things that's so dear to me, is hearing that gravelly voice that
Yeah.
she would, and she would just blare it out
All
to
right.
everybody, that whole line of riders. She was always working her way in and out, talking to the kids, or telling the wrangler what to do, or helping the instructor.
Yeah.
I mean, she was prancing on Dr. Pepper all the time. It was
Which I
Dr.
just
Pepper, and
love.
I'm trying to remember her other horse, the Arabian. I'll
Oh, I
remember
should
it
remember
later.
too, because that's during my time period.
Yeah.
But I mean,
But
early,
Dr.
early.
Pepper was her love.
Yes,
She loved
completely.
Dr. Pepper.
Well, it's funny because I remember of course, during camp, I'm not married as a camper. And then the first time I went back as a counselor, I wasn't married. But the second time, and of course, I would wear my wedding ring. And she would always call me out on it saying, no jewelry, And I mean, not, but I mean, that's a safety thing,
Right.
right? I don't want my fingers ripped off, which I'm so bad about it. I do it all the time still. But honestly, in my head, I can hear her saying, no rings, no
Right.
bracelets, no earrings. They're going to
Right.
catch on branches. You never know, the horse is going to throw you or something. But so her skills as an equestrian, what are your thoughts on that?
She and again, I'll see if I can find this picture, but there is a picture of her in Brackenridge Park. She was a hunter jumper.
Yeah.
She was on a horse, jumping, and she did it all. She did Western, she did English. She was a very uh I guess just a student of horses and all the different riding styles. And, she would get up and, she rode English most of the time. She would ride Western some, but she'd
Mm-hmm.
say, if that saddle's too heavy, as she aged, but I
Yeah.
mean, she was
Yeah.
still very proficient as an English rider, um, and posting and all that stuff. I mean, gosh, I could close my eyes and still see her just going across the field.
Okay, well, I love it because her saying that I'd say for all of us that knew her in her life
Yeah.
about saddling your own horse, um, which is just so perfect.
Yeah.
It's
Always saddle your own horse.
there you go. That's the right
And
way
she
to say it.
would, even until the very end, she
Yeah,
would get out there and throw that saddle. She'd be wobbling, that little wobbly walk
and we're
because of her
talking
leg.
we're talking 100 plus years
Yeah, a
old.
100 plus.
Yeah,
I remember the day that she got thrown from the horse. I will
yeah.
never forget that day as long as I live.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, that's actually how Connie passed. Was she was thrown from her beloved horse, and why it's so very tragic. It's just um, it doesn't sound right for me to say fitting, but that was her love.
That's
And
how she wanted to
that's
go.
how she
She
wanted to go.
told me, she said, I mean, and she was very honest about aging and how
Yeah.
hard. And she said, I don't want to be incapacitated. And,
Yeah.
she lived on her own until
Beyond
at 100,
impressive.
almost
Yeah.
102, she
Yeah.
was still living by herself.
Well, now,
I mean, people checked in on her and did stuff, but she hadn't been driving for about 10 years, so she was
but
real,
she was still
relying on.
riding. Yeah.
But she was still riding. She
And what
wasn't
was
driving.
it? I don't know. And if I've got this wrong, make sure you correct me. But it was either you or Kathy in her, her last days at the hospital. And maybe it was ours. I'm sorry. But that the doctor was scolding y'all basically to say, you let her ride
Yeah,
or something,
yeah,
You didn't
and
know
and
Connie.
right, you don't know Connie,
Yeah.
and so that's what was so interesting, and I I remember I snuck out of camp after the accident
Yeah. Yeah.
because I wanted to go see her.
Right.
I mean, the last thing I saw was them putting her in a helicopter and flying her off the field.
Yeah.
And a couple of nights later, I was able to, get out of camp. Kathy went and saw her, my partner, and to check on her because we had that relationship with Connie.
Right.
And the big thing I think that really did her in was the doctors basically said, you're going to have to go to a rehab facility
Mm.
from, because she was doing okay,
Oh,
in the
wow.
hospital. I
Okay.
mean, it fractured her neck, but she wasn't paralyzed. And they basically said, you're going to have to probably go to a rehab facility for, and I don't know if they said forever or whatever. And
Yeah.
I think that was there. And then, not long after that, she was we were there in the hospital with her, and she had a, not a stroke, but her heart stopped, and there was some, there was issues with that. And then that kind of really led to the rest of the downfall with her. But she was fiercely independent, and she didn't
Yeah.
want anybody taking care of her. And I think she knew that, and she's like, I'm going out my way,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Well, and didn't I'm sorry, we're getting off here, but and didn't the horse Dr. Pepper pass
Yes.
fairly soon,
Dr.
within the next year or so?
Yes, Dr. Pepper passed right before that next summer
So before camp
of
started
but
again.
before camp started. Yep. Dr. Pepper was at her memorial service. He had a beautiful bed of roses, and he
Oh,
acted up the whole time during that memorial service.
did
He
he?
was dancing and prancing. They had, if I'm not mistaken, they had him tied to the hitching post right outside of the barn there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he was just. And I'm like, Connie is probably irritating him. But I do remember that
Yeah.
he was just kind of fidgety. I mean, because he would stand for long periods of time, just as calm as he could be. But that day, I think he just knew what was going on, and he was missing Connie, and he was like, "I'm not gonna not have another summer with her."
I
I
mean,
believe.
I love that connection, and I so believe that about animals. But I
Mhm.
just horses are just such magnificent beasts, and I say beasts in the most loving way.
Yes.
Just, I mean, just the connection and the feeling that they give out and the ability they have. And I know that Connie, I've never not known her to not have that connection, whether it was, with Enchilada or,
Yeah.
whoever might be, honorary. Excuse me, that's the name of a horse, not.
Yeah. Yes. There were
um,
always some great horse names.
there's some great ones, but okay. So I know that, of course, you got to share a long relationship with her and hear stories, and possibly from others too. But are there some individual, and maybe you've shared them, so we can move on, but interesting or fun stories that you would like people to know about her?
Well, speaking about Dr. Pepper, and I
Okay.
believe it was Dr. Pepper, this was in the off season. was in the stall with him, and he was not happy, and he kicked her, and he broke her thigh.
No, I didn't know
Yes.
that. All right.
Yeah, and that's why she was hospitalized, and basically they had to remove part of her femur. So that's why her boots, as she aged, you saw, and
A
I
higher heel.
actually
Yeah.
have a pair of her boots.
Oh, I love
I do.
that.
I have a pair of her boots that have the built up of about 2 inches, maybe an
Wow.
inch and a half,
I actually did
because
not know
her
that.
leg, yeah, her leg was shattered basically, and they rebuilt it enough to be able to get that.
That's
Um, you know,
amazing. And what age do you think she was about?
that was probably in the early '90s, maybe. So she would have been in probably in I don't maybe it was late '80s, either late '80s, early '90s. And then
Yeah.
another great story about that is, they have Waldemar Women's Week. So
Yeah.
it's a week in September where the women would come and kind of play like campers again.
Yeah.
And Connie would always go and loved it. And she would take them horseback riding. And the one of this is a great story. They were riding up to the top of this hill where they would have breakfast. They would do a breakfast, and Connie, weaving in and out, taking care, put your heels down, get that horse over here, doing all that. And one horse got into a hornet's nest. And the horse then started acting up. Connie went over to try to, grab the reins and calm the horse down. Well, in the process, she got thrown, and at that time, I believe it punctured her lung.
Oh, goodness.
And so they had to get her sent to San Antonio, to the hospital. And because she was working, they filed a workman's comp claim. And they called the office and said, I think there's a mistake on this lady's age, because I think she was like 92, 93. Like, she was born in 1901, and you're filing a workman's comp
I
for her being
love
thrown from
that.
a from being thrown off of a horse while she was
Okay.
working.
I love that story.
Yeah.
I mean, but okay, if you know her, you know it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
you just there's no bit of it that you don't believe that she wasn't on that
And
horse. And I'm sure, well, just getting up, moving the horses at 5:30 or whatever
every morning.
every morning, bringing them in and taking them out at night to pasture. But okay, what about I actually now I knew Jack for maybe 2 years. But I don't really remember. I thought they lived there. I don't know if it was during the summer or they had their own place.
They actually, Jack was still alive. He had had a stroke, and he was still alive. So Connie was just this incredible lady. Like you said, up at 5,
Yeah,
didn't go to bed. I mean, didn't finish with the horses probably until 7 or 8 at night.
yeah.
And she was taking care of him. They had a little
Oh,
trailer, a
wow.
little trailer that was right there, to the left of, if you know Aldemar, it was to the left of the stable there,
Absolutely, yeah.
right below where the laundry was. And
Right.
and she would take care of him there.
Wow.
At night, she would leave him there during the day, or have people check on him. And there was enough time that she took care of him
Wow.
for
I
those
mean,
two
just,
years.
every bit of it is so amazing. Now, were they there 12 months out of the year?
No, that
Okay.
was only summertime. So
Okay.
they would live in Junction. They had a
Okay.
ranch house there,
Okay.
and then when they brought the horses, they would move down to that trailer. And like I said, I don't know how long. That was in '84 that I know that trailer was there. And
Okay.
Connie then continued to live in that trailer for a long time after Jack passed,
Yeah.
because she was right there with the horses up at 5, to get them brought in from pasture. And she'd go ringing that cowbell
Yeah.
to the wranglers to get them up. And if the wranglers
Yeah.
had been out the night before, they were slow coming down, and she's at the bottom of the stairs yelling at them,
Oh my
come on, you
gosh.
gotta get up, we gotta get, but
Oh,
those
that's
types of
so,
things.
yeah,
But she
absolutely.
lived, and I think until um sh when she had a car accident. She drove this beautiful red Thunderbird.
Oh,
I'll never
I kind of remember that.
Yeah, she had a red Thunderbird that
Yeah.
she drove, And I think what happened, and I'm not again, my memory's not the greatest, but I think this she was headed one direction. The sun was in her eyes, and she went over the center line and was in a head-on collision. No one was hurt, but
Oh my
that
goodness.
was the last of her driving
Oh,
days.
that's
And
scary.
so I think after that, she relied on people like Jan Cannon to bring her out to camp.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of when she stopped. And that was when Liz Pohl kind of came on, I
Mhm.
think, to help with the horses. And that was in the early, I think, early 90s, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken.
And I know they had a good relationship, and Liz was so
Yeah.
respectful and loving of
Yes.
Connie. Well, what do you think that? Do you know of any challenges you think she faced throughout her lifetime? I mean, well, besides, goodness, fracturing your femur or thigh, and then everything just being thrown. But
You know, um, and I don't know a lot of the details, but I know that she did have some issues because she was a strong woman
mhm,
about people pushing against her. And she shared something, and I don't remember all of it because I think I was so shocked that she was sharing it. But that men would try to take advantage of her, and she would fight back. And that I there that was many a Saturday afternoon that I would go to Kerrville and I would sit in her house chair that she sat in.
oh, I love that.
When they sold her,
Some of her
when it
good,
had an estate sale, I was like,
yeah,
I want that chair, and I
yeah,
still have it.
I
You
love
know,
it.
but she would sit there in that chair with her legs over it, and she would just tell those stories. And she talked a lot about how the injustices that happened with the African Americans that really bothered her.
Yeah,
That was something that she had that kind, loving heart for everybody. She didn't care where you came from,
yeah,
and that was she talked about that because she lived those days
yeah,
through that. So those were
yeah,
challenges, I think, that she had in a lot of ways. And like she said, Rita, I've seen so many things change because she was horse and buggy when she was, born, and then
yeah,
the automobile, and then all the different changes that took place about it. I wish I had recorded a lot of it because some of it I
yeah.
just don't remember, but it was just really special.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. She went through so much of it, the changes throughout her
Mhm.
lifetime. And do you think she wrote about it in her book? And do you have the book right next to you or what?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I have the
Do you have,
very first original
yeah.
one that she did,
Yeah.
and she wrote a wonderful thing. I remember when she signed it for me, and
Oh,
it's
I
very
love that.
special. She was a woman with words, and her words
Yeah.
always meant something. And so I have two books, and they're both signed by her, and both very, very special
So
to
the
me. But this
second,
one,
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I'd say the
Go ahead.
second version, is that the one with her and Jack on the cover or is that a different one?
Well, it's the same book. It's
Yeah, it's just
just
different
done a little
covers.
nicer. This
Okay.
was done by Kerr County Printing or something like that. She
Okay.
was
Yeah.
so excited.
Well, rightly
Um,
so.
and and it I yeah. And so she was all about books. And I think, and Ginger, you may not want to put this in, but she wanted to do a writing manual. And
She should have.
I have tapes where I'm pretty sure, I just don't know where they are, but she recorded these tapes on a tape
Okay,
recorder.
Rita, we have got to get those for
I've
posterity.
got to find them. I've got to find. I think I might know where they are.
Because,
But
even for people to hear her voice, I mean,
well, I do
just to
have a
share.
tape, but I don't know that I have a tape player of her with Connie's song. Um,
Yes.
Connie's song that whoever wrote for her.
Yeah.
And I think there's something with her voice. But you can also get her voice. There's a interview with her on
YouTube or,
yeah, oh, there's one that talks, and it's very good about, and you can really hear her voice. It was the American West or something. I'll find it and I'll send
yeah.
it to you. But I listen to that every so often because it'll be a year and a week. No, sorry, 1 week from today will be the anniversary of her death. She died on August 17th.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
and and it was a Sunday. On top of that, I remember that it being a Sunday, and we had gone to see her on Saturday. And I remember the last thing that we did for her was we were standing around talking to her, and she said, "I need you to put my boots on." And we're
Oh,
like, "Okay." So we went down, and we pretended like we put her
yeah.
boots on. She was ready
Yeah.
to go. And then I think that next morning is when she passed.
Oh,
But
that's
that's one
so
of the fondest
touching.
things, that I was like, she wanted to go with her boots on. And we
Absolutely.
put those boots on her in that hospital bed.
I mean that's very touching. I mean, and what an
Yeah.
honor that you all got to,
Yeah.
even be thought of her thought process to do that. I mean, she
Yeah.
really is just inspired generations.
Yes.
If four, if not five generations. I mean, just so many generations with only wonderful thoughts about her and impressions of her and um, grateful that she was, even if it was 6 weeks out of the year. Back when my mother and I went to camp, it was 6 weeks. But to think that we got to be part of that,
Mhm.
time with her.
And she would remember the kids and their moms
Absolutely.
and their grandmas. She would tell them stories. And, she did that up close to the end. She had macular degeneration towards the
Okay.
end.
Okay.
And that was, so she really struggled with being able to see. But boy, she'd pull out that magnifying glass that she had to read. She still would read up until, as long as she could. But the macular degeneration, she said she had a hard time being able to see kids' faces.
Oh,
Um,
it breaks my heart for her because you
yeah,
just think she knew everybody, and I'm sure you see the outline of a horse, but the
yeah.
intricacies of maybe knowing. But one of the things, and forgive me for stepping on you, but one of my dear memories of her is that when I had my son Tony Allen, she uh, I was just visiting camp, and she had purchased him a $10 um, uh, bond, U.S. bond
Bond,
for
savings
him,
bond.
and gave it to us. And I it's just so sweet. I mean, she, like I said, just generations of people that love her and miss her.
Yeah. I mean, and that just reminded me, because her eyesight was failing. And, we always would when I would go out to see her, we would always end our time by going out to eat. And she
Yeah.
always wanted to pay, and she
Oh,
couldn't see, but she would always fold her money. So she knew what bills a different way.
oh, that's
So,
brilliant.
she was adaptive. I mean, super adapted that way, but she would fold them a certain way, and so she knew if it was a 20, a 10, or whatever.
Oh,
And
that's
she
so
would always want
impressive.
to pay, and we'd always fight about that. But we would
Yeah,
always go, and we'd go to Mamacita's, and we'd have dinner and kind of finish out our day. Just sitting and visiting.
I
Just
love
or
that. Well,
driving. I would take her driving sometimes out. Different places.
well,
Because she
I
enjoyed.
know for a fact how much she loved you and appreciated you and y'all's friendship. And
Yeah.
let me ask you something fun.
Okay.
So, if they do a movie about her, who in the world should play her part?
Oh my gosh,
You're going
that is
to.
probably not the best because I am not into movie stars, but I don't know. But
That's
oh
okay.
my gosh,
You don't have to name anybody. I just thought, wouldn't that be great though? I mean, she just has
there
just
was
with her
just
life so
yeah, there
inspirational.
was just something about her that I don't know. She touched so many people, and she truly cared about you and cared about people and what was going on and how things were, and you know up until the last, she would always ask about certain, things that she would
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that. Well, as we close out here, what how would you like for her to be remembered, just, for the people that don't know her and a remembrance of the people that do and love her?
She was one, always a lady, no matter what. She was always a lady. She'd get dirty. She always had her nails done.
Yeah, I
She
remember that.
always looked
You're
just
right.
beautiful. I
Yeah.
mean, and but there that was one piece of her. And then there was that piece that she'd get in there and sling mud and horse shit and, you know, sew up whatever she needed to on a horse.
Yeah.
So she could adapt. And I think she was one of the most, I think, adaptable people with everything that she went through in all of her life, and still loved life. She was never bitter. I don't ever remember her. She'd aches and pains here. I only remember her getting mad one time. It's a funny story, but it was she couldn't see real well at
Yeah.
the end, and her
Yeah.
house wasn't always perfectly clean. But it was nice. I mean, it wasn't bad. And,
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't horrible. But I remember two people went and cleaned her house, and she was so mad. That's the only time that I
Really?
can remember her being mad. And I think it was, part of her saying, I can't still do this or whatever. I don't remember.
I
But that
get
was
it.
one of the
I get it.
few times
Yeah.
that I ever remember her being just really angry. I mean, she'd get mad at, the horses or if you weren't doing something, but it was a different kind of anger.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it had to deal with safety or whatever with the horses
Yeah.
and all of that. But that was probably one of the only times. But she was just this most loving, caring um, woman that I'm blessed to have spent almost 20 years knowing.
I know it's, and I know that right now she is smiling down and just grateful that you're saying her name and sharing
Yeah,
the love that we can all now listen to you and talk, have our remembrances of her.
yeah,
So I love you, and it's been, I appreciate you sharing about Connie and her just amazing self in life. And,
yeah,
just the epitome of a woman rancher and, that livelihood.
yeah.
So, the brilliant woman that she was, and you too, Rita. So I thank you so very much. I'm going to ask you, don't get off just yet. I will stop the recording.
Okay.
Um, but for everyone here, I hope you check in the where I'll write about the information and description of links to be able to go to and or to be able to purchase her book, which I'm sure it's still on Amazon. So I thank you for sharing time with us, and Naked Rancher out.